I'd like to welcome everybody to today's Cutter Transportation webcast. Our presenter today is Dr. Nikhil Menon. He is a postdoctoral research scholar here at the Center for Urban Transportation Research at the University of South Florida. Here he works on projects in the areas autonomous vehicles, urban mobility, and travel behavior. He received his PhD in civil transportation engineering from the University of South Florida. In addition, he has extensive experience in autonomous vehicles. Nikhil has also been involved in FDOT's initiatives in field of logistics and aviation. And he also possesses expertise in data collection using stated preference experiments. So with that being said, I'm going to hand the rest of today's presentation over to Nikhil. Nikhil?
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webcast. My name is Nikhil Menon, and we're going to be talking about autonomous vehicles. This is mainly dealing with consumers' perceptions of autonomous vehicles, their intended adoption, and their impacts on household vehicle ownership. So enhancing safety and mitigating human error in driving have been US DOT's top priority for the recent past in the last few years, and research and development R&D in automotive and tech industries have been trying to bring automation into vehicles. This is supplemented by the presence of advanced features such as ACC, parking assist, and lane keeping systems whose main objectives have been to enhance safety. The objective here is to computerize the driving process and eventually eliminate the need for a human driver. Autonomous vehicles are a class of such vehicles that drive by themselves with little to no need of a human driver. As you can see, many auto and tech majors are involved in rolling out their versions of autonomous vehicles. The graphic on the left shows all the companies that are currently involved in various spaces around the autonomous vehicle industry. As per this graphic, there are 263 such companies that are currently working in the autonomous vehicle sector across various paradigms. The graphic on the right shows the progress that states have made with autonomous vehicle legislation. There are some states like Florida and California where the legislations have passed. There are some states where it is under consideration, and there are some states where there are still discussions that need to be done before we can make progress. As you can see, some cities such as Pittsburgh, Phoenix, and San Francisco have been open for AV testing for some time now, and this has led this kind of a climate has led to wide speculations on market penetration, with dates ranging from as early as 2025 for market penetration to all the way up to 2040 and even 2050. The motivation for this research stems from the fact that not all emerging technologies are welcomed by the general public. Most technologies undergo decades of development and market growth before they eventually penetrate into the market. Except for early adopters, most consumers are close-minded about emerging technologies. Past literature on public opinions regarding AVs failed to provide deeper insights on the influence of multiple factors, and there is also very little evidence on generational level preferences in the adoption of AVs. Understanding generation level influences are important because recent discussions have stemmed to the points where the millennials have been getting far fewer driving licenses in the last few years. They've been owning very few cars, in contrast to the older generation who used to equate car with freedom, who still equate car with freedom in a way. This leads to the possibility of the presence of different triggers towards the adoption for different generations. And these we feel are very interesting insights considering the vast potential for autonomous vehicles. So these generational level similarities in behavior are interesting, but these are broad-based assumptions in themselves. In order to, to say something like all millennials behave a certain way to adopt vehicles, adopt AVs is itself a broad-based assumption. So past research has worked on identifying market segments which are basically similar, subgroups with similar behavioral characteristics. These market segments essentially are a cluster that enhances our understanding and better analyzes, triggers for adoption of autonomous vehicles. These are likely to guide, tomorrow's policies as well. So on the other hand of the spectrum is this aspect where there is this high initial cost of owning autonomous vehicles. There's been a lot of discussion on how we may not be able to afford autonomous vehicles because of their cost, which has led to the rise of many interesting business models. One among them is the shared autonomous vehicles, which are SAVs in this presentation. SAVs have been looked at as an inexpensive way of utilizing this technology, you know, and past research basically has tried to simulate SAV fleets in order to show that there are cost benefits versus individually owning and operating autonomous vehicles. This also is exacerbated by the fact that new companies and existing companies have entered the self-driving ride-sharing market, which gives rise to this notion that when there are enough suppliers in the market, you may not need to own a household vehicle. So household vehicle ownership is an interesting aspect to study, precisely because of these changes that have happened in the last few years. Previous studies have discussed changes in household vehicle ownership due to car and rideshare services, but there has not been a lot of active research on similar impacts due to the advent of shared autonomous vehicles. So the objective of this research, the objective of this presentation is to assess public opinions regarding autonomous vehicles. Multi-population surveys elicit opinions on familiarity, benefits and concerns, and intended adoption, use of autonomous vehicles, etc., etc. We conducted a multi-population survey which elicited information on a lot of these aspects, and we are trying to look at some of these as we go from here. And we'll be dealing with a lot of these aspects in the presentation today. A second objective is to understand consumers' perceptions and intended adoption of AVs. This has been divided into 3 stages where we are using this different approach, where we are trying to understand and identify AV consumer market segments. So these market segments, as I discussed earlier, are subgroups with similar behavioral characteristics. The second stage, once we identify the market segments, is to understand the probability of a respondent belonging to a particular market segment. We need to understand the makeup of these market segments to identify who goes where, so that we have a better understanding of what kind of market segments what kind of people belong to what kind of market segments. Once we have an understanding of this, the third stage of this research is to understand the intended adoption of autonomous vehicles. What are the factors that influence the adoption of autonomous vehicles for each of these consumer market segments? So we have one model for one adoption model for that particular consumer market segment. So we have 4. We will be determining what are the different factors that trigger the adoption. Last part of this research is to understand the potential impact of shared AVs on household vehicle ownership. So we are assessing people's likelihood to relinquish, that is to give up, one of their household vehicles with the introduction of shared autonomous vehicles in the market. So findings from the literature, I'm going to quickly skim through some of these. Findings from the literature say, show that AVs are going to be available for mass consumption by 2040. They say that individual level benefits of AVs are going to be available as early as 2025, whereas majority of the system level enhancements in terms of congestion or in terms of emission, again, congestion is a very controversial influence to discuss, but most of these system level enhancements are only going to be available perhaps by 2050. Expected benefits: enhanced safety, improved fuel efficiency, and reductions in emissions and traffic are some of the most cited in the literature. Most cited concerns: equipment failure, software security, privacy issues, giving up control of their vehicles. This was something that we found it was very interesting, where human drivers are currently not comfortable with the idea of giving up control of their vehicles, and that's a very highly cited concern. In some cases, respondents were unsure whether benefits outweighed these costs and risks, because some respondents felt that they did not want to adopt AVs as they trusted their driving skills over the technology. And that is the reality of it today. We also found that intended adoption of autonomous vehicles was sensitive to economic incentives. We see that a lot of people are attracted to autonomous vehicles with the prospect of having cheaper car insurances. Car insurance is still a very it's still it's a topic that has not had so much clarity, except for the fact that we hear a lot about cheaper car insurances, but we don't know how it would work eventually. As for willingness to pay, we find that respondents are ready to pay anything between $4,900 and $10,000 for complete automation. So note that we are looking at complete automation at this, for this presentation. We are looking at fully autonomous vehicles, which are basically level 5 in the SAE system. Demographically speaking, males seem to be more interested in AVs. Other factors include younger ages, higher education levels, residences in urban and suburban areas. They're more likely to be interested in, in autonomous vehicles. Generational level preferences. There's not a lot of work that's been done on generational level preferences, except that there are these studies which state younger adults preferring full automation and older adults preferring partial automation. These are kind of contradicting to what we normally associate, these generations to behave, and these certainly need some kind of, investigation into the aspect. So, before we go into more details, the major aspect that governs the car ownership aspect, has been investigated in detail in the literature in the past, and we see that decline in car purchases could be a function of changes in urban living, the advent of new technology, environmental awareness, and shifting economic circumstances. Car ownership relinquishment is also influenced a lot by life events which lead to changes in travel behavior. So this brings us to the part of understanding what AVs would do on our future travel. What are the impacts of these autonomous vehicles on the way we travel in the future? So there are shorter, medium, and long-term impacts. Short-term impacts usually look at activities inside an AV. You could look at the various activities you could engage in, thereby you could enhance your productivity, or you could work less in your office and do part of the work in your car, which would eventually add up to the time savings that you may make in this regard. There's also discussions about network capacity improvements and safety. Medium-term impacts of AVs look at car ownership models, alterations to existing car ownership models. There are basically newer car ownership models that have been arising. Especially you can see the Cadillac and some of those models which have some of those companies which have different kinds of car ownership models than the conventional ones. Those are some of the medium-term impacts, and there's also likely impact on mode choices in the medium term. Longer-term impacts are mostly restricted to household location, which will have an impact on land use and urban development, etc., etc. And there's a lot of other influences on how we might travel more with autonomous vehicles, with increasing VMT, increase in emissions, increase in sprawl. These are all some of the cited literature on impacts of AV on future travel. And it's also seen that shared autonomous vehicles are more likely to redefine car ownership and lead to a decline in car sales. So the research design for this project depended on setting up a survey and collecting data. We conducted multi-population surveys. We had two population streams. One was the USF system, which included the students, faculty, and staff of the University of South Florida campus. And the second one was the members of AAA South, which is headquartered in Tampa. So these surveys were conducted in the months of April and June 2015. And the survey had three parts to it majorly, with the first part looking at general information and the second part looking at consumers' perception of autonomous vehicles, and the third part of the survey looking at anticipated impacts of AVs on future travel. Some quality control procedures were employed, and sanity checks were employed in the final responses that we received. We received a total of 3,494 responses, which were cleaned for various aberrations in the data, and we arrived at a final sample size of 2,658 samples that could be used for our studies. So now we go into the part of assessing public opinions about autonomous vehicles. These are some of the demographics. These are some of the descriptive statistics of respondent and household demographics that are available. As you can see, this has been divided into the survey sample and the males and females, and then you have the four generations that are represented as millennials, Generation X, baby boomers, and the Great Generation. Millennials, for those who are wondering, are respondents who are 35 and less in this survey. During the time of the survey, um, the Generation X's are respondents between 36 and 49 years old. Baby boomers are 50 and 64, between 50 and 64 years old, and the Great Generation is 65 years and older. So as you can see, there were 53% of the survey respondents were males, and you can see that a large section of the Great Generation, a large segment of the Great Generation respondents were males, which amounted to close to 70%. You can see that among low-income households, that is households with less than $50,000 per annum, millennials constituted the highest segment of those low-income households, and you can also see that millennials constituted the generation with the lowest number of vehicles owned in their households. Uh, the second aspect of the survey focused on current travel characteristics and crash history, and you can see that millennials and the Generation X are the respondents, the maximum percentage of respondents who drove alone for their commute. There's also evidence to see that millennials traveled almost 60 minutes and 60 minutes and above for traveling for doing all their activities in a particular day. So now the next aspect that we asked was the presence of safety automation features currently in their vehicles. We can see that most vehicles are currently equipped with backup cameras, followed by blind spot detection systems and adaptive headlamps. Those were the three top safety features that were currently available in the vehicles. We also asked respondents about their interest in safety automation features for their future vehicle, and they again expressed interest in having these blind spot detection systems, backup cameras, and night vision assist as their three most desirable safety automation features for their vehicles. There are of course other percentages as well. As you can see, for instance, you can see that a very minimal percentage asked for wireless internet, and a similarly low percentage of people were interested in installing self-parking systems. We explained all these systems so that respondents did not get confused about what each system did. So they had a clear idea of what each system did, and we were asking them whether they would be interested in having this in their future vehicle. Now, as you can see, the major aspect of, before we go into the details of conducting such a survey, it is important to know what are the familiarity levels with these respondents. So we did inquire with respondents how familiar they were with autonomous vehicles, and we see that about 70% of them are slightly or moderately familiar with autonomous vehicles. It was interesting to see that higher shares of millennials were somehow not familiar with autonomous vehicles in this survey. Consumers were then asked about their potential, the opinions on potential benefits with autonomous vehicles, and we see that the top three benefits, according to consumers, are fewer traffic crashes and increased roadway safety, followed by more productive use of travel time, followed by less stressful driving experience. It was interesting to note that close to 40% of the respondents said they were not likely to observe less traffic congestion with the introduction of autonomous vehicles, something which we have been finding a lot more. And another interesting thing was that close to 40% of the respondents again said they were not interested, they were not sure about lower vehicular emissions, which is kind of straightforward thinking. If you're traveling more, there are likely to be more and more emissions, more and more vehicular emissions. So now what we did was we investigated the top three benefits and tried to see any kind of generational patterns that we were able to observe. So as you can see, as respondents as respondents went over in age, as the older generations seem to be more unsure about certain benefits that were likely to happen with autonomous vehicles. This trend is something that we see across the other benefits as well. And this is something that we need to take into consideration, that the older generations seem more and more unsure about these benefits as compared to their younger counterparts. The younger counterparts seem to be more or less on either side of the spectrum, but the older generations seem to be inching towards the uncertain side of it. Similarly, similar to assessing the importance of the potential benefits, we also asked consumers' opinions on their concerns with autonomous vehicles. The top three concerns with autonomous vehicles were system equipment failure, performance in unexpected traffic and poor weather conditions, and finally the aspect of giving up control of the steering wheel to the vehicle. So we see a similar higher uncertainty as the older generations seem to have a higher uncertainty regarding AV concerns. As this is something that we see across these concerns as well, as you can see through the markings. Now, we did ask this question about adoption, but we decided to ask this question about adoption across two different stages. We asked this adoption question at the very beginning of the survey to understand where respondents were on the adoption aspect, and we saw that 1/4 of the respondents were unsure about adoption. There was 25% of the respondents, as you can see on the first column, who were unsure about adopting autonomous vehicles. Then what we did was, once we got this information, we then provided these respondents with some information regarding the potential benefits and concerns with autonomous vehicles. So as they were going through the survey, they obtained more and more information that would help them process their responses / process their opinion about autonomous vehicles. Once this was done, we asked them at the end, towards the end of the survey, whether they would still like to adopt autonomous vehicles when they became available. And you can see that the percentage of people who were on the fence reduced somewhat drastically. So something that we noticed was that during the course of the survey itself, which was a 10 to 15 minute survey, during the course of the survey itself, providing information made the respondents less uncertain about adopting, about their adoption decisions. They either decided that they did not want this technology, or they decided that this was something that they would be interested in. So this was an interesting exercise which kind of shows the temporal instability in terms of a technology that is not out there for people to observe and assimilate information based off of that. Then we looked at some of the travel behavioral aspects of it. We see that higher shares of younger generations travel more than their older counterparts, which is these gray lines are areas where respondents travel around 60 to 119 minutes a day on an average, and the yellow lines, the yellow gold lines on the top, are the lines where people travel 120 minutes or more. So you can see that higher shares of younger generations travel more. Similarly, males travel more than females is something that you see as well with females and males. When we asked this potential question of how much would you travel more if you had autonomous vehicles, we found that respondents foresee far more travel with autonomous vehicles than they currently do, and this is kind of expected in terms of our expectations with this technology. This would ease the process of driving, and that would incline more and more people to drive more to their drive more and achieve more during the day. So as you can see, we have far more number of people in the yellow bars, which are 120 minutes and more. And another interesting aspect that we looked at was, moving further away for affordable and better housing with the introduction of autonomous vehicles. Something that we see is that the older generations are very unlikely to move, because seeing by their ever increasing higher percentage of the gray lines, of the gray columns, which is interesting. And the other interesting thing that I have found is that among among the female and male respondents, it seems like males are more sure of moving further, whereas women are less likely to talk about these kind of decisions, which are perhaps a family decision at the end of the day. So these were some of the major aspects looking across generations and looking across the gender aspects of it in a very descriptive sense. The next section that we are going to look at includes consumers' perceptions and intended adoption of autonomous vehicles. So the objective here is to identify, there are three objectives, the three main objectives to this process, the three stages that I discussed earlier. Our first objective is to identify autonomous vehicle consumer market segments. Once these autonomous vehicle consumer market segments are identified, we need to understand where each respondent belongs in a particular market segment. Do I belong to market segment X or market segment Y or market segment Z? And once I understand that, we need to then look at what are the factors that will influence the adoption of autonomous vehicles in these particular market segments. So in order to do this, we have the data that we used for the survey. It is slightly less than the 2,658 accounting for data quality. So we have 2,477 samples, and you can see some major descriptives of this data set. The methodology that we employed for the stage 1, which is identifying market segments, is the two-step cluster analysis. The objective of using cluster analysis is to restructure the data into groups which have high degree of association within elements of each group. So the idea here is to uncover respondent subgroups with diverse characteristics which will provide more deeper insights into decision-making processes. So in this case study, we hypothesized that any the consumers adoption of autonomous vehicles will likely be influenced by their perception of the benefits and concerns with these autonomous vehicles. Basically, we had asked respondents what would their opinions be on certain benefits and concerns with autonomous vehicles, and we used that to understand what would their influence lie on adoption of autonomous vehicles. Basically, when we did that, we found we used 5 benefits and 6 concern variables in order to identify 4 market segments. These 4 market segments are the benefits-dominated market segment, the concerns-dominated market segment, the uncertain market segment, and the well-informed market segment. I will go into details right now. So these are the the rows in yellow are the benefits, the rows in orange are the concerns, and these were the ones that were used to load these respondents into specific market segments. So as you can see, the benefits dominated cluster belongs to our respondents who thought that the benefits of autonomous vehicles were highly likely, influenced by these scores that you observe in bold. So these are scores from 1 to 5, where 1 is extremely unlikely and 5 is extremely likely. So it was a Likert scale from extremely unlikely to extremely likely, and you can see that respondents in the benefits dominated market segment thought that most of these benefits were very likely with the introduction of autonomous vehicles. Similarly, we have the concerns dominated market segment on the far end of the slide, where respondents have huge concerns about autonomous vehicles. These concerns loaded very highly on these respondents, and they felt that these are likely to be issues that will prevent them from adopting autonomous vehicles when they became available. So these are some of the these are some of the expected clusters in a way. The more interesting ones are the ones in the middle, especially the one which is the uncertain market segment. The uncertain market segment are people who were on the fence about the benefits and concerns. As you can see by the scores, they are all around 3. They are these scores are focusing all around the 3 range. Yeah, the 3 points range. So these are people who are unsure and very likely to wait before they adopt this technology. The last segment, the last cluster are people who were called as the well-informed market segment, and these are respondents who thought that the benefits and concerns are equally likely, and they made a more well-informed opinion about these benefits and concerns, and that influenced their adoption decision in a certain way. So if you want to see the bottommost row, that is the likelihood of adopting autonomous vehicles when they become available in the market, we see that the benefits dominated cluster were the scores of the benefits dominated cluster were correlated with the adoption potential, and we obtained a very high score for adoption. Basically meaning that people who belong to the benefits dominated segment are actually very likely to adopt autonomous vehicles when they are available in the market. On the other hand, the concerns dominated market segment, they are least likely to adopt autonomous vehicles when they become available in the market, primarily because they are concerned about the various aspects, and that influences their adoption decision. Similarly, you can see that the uncertain cluster is on the fence again when it comes to the adoption, and the well-informed cluster is gearing towards adoption, which is seen by their average score, which is 3.39. They are somewhere there. They are most likely to be the next best category to adopt this technology. So we finished. We found that there are four autonomous vehicle market segments, which are the benefits dominated, concerns dominated, uncertain, and the well-informed market segment. So the next step now is to understand the probability of respondents belonging to a particular market segment. Who belongs where? That is the main question that needs to be identified at this stage and answered at this stage. In order to do that, we employed multinomial logit models to explore this aspect. I'm not going to go into the methodology in big detail. We can talk about it at the end if anyone is interested. So basically, what we found was that we have four different segments, and we see the various effects that different parameters have on each of these market segments. For instance, we see that males are more likely to be in the benefits dominated market segment. University respondents more likely to be in the benefits dominated market segment. Respondents who take a lot of time to park time 10 plus minutes, are more likely to be in the benefits dominated market segment. Millennials, that is respondents who are respondents who are between the ages of 18 and 35 are more likely to be in the well-informed market segment in comparison to the oldest generation, GG, the great generation. We also see that, for instance, households which have extremely high income, that is $150,000 plus, would less likely to be in a concerns dominated market segment. It is likely that respondents belonging to rich households, or respondents belonging to high income households, are more exposed to discussions on this technology, which would likely have alleviated their concerns about some of those aspects that we saw in some of the other segments. So they are less likely to be in concerns dominated market segment. Respondents who have a graduate degree are less likely to be in the concerns dominated market segment. Which is an interesting observation as well. The most interesting part of it was with vehicle ownership, where we see that households with high number of vehicle ownerships, that is 3+ vehicles, are extremely likely to be in a concerns dominated market segment. And we wonder why, because these respondents are likely to be on the higher side of the economic spectrum, but it seems like there is an entrenchment to the driving culture. People who own more than 3+ vehicles in their households are likely to be entrenched by the whole aspect of whole charm of owning vehicles, that they don't want to invest in a technology that will likely take the joy of driving away from them, or so that's perhaps likely the reason why they are in the concerns dominated market segment. And it has the same effect on baby boomers as well, as you can see that, who are more likely to be in the concerns dominated market segment in comparison to their older generation. So basically what this exercise did was to for us to give an insight, for us to get some idea of who belongs to a particular market segment. This is basically done to understand the makeup of what each market segment might look like. So if you want to target a particular market segment, you kind of know in general terms who to target, so that you can look at targeted marketing approaches in order to look at some of these aspects. The next stage, once we did this, was to estimate factors that influence the adoption of autonomous vehicles. In order to do this, we employed ordered probit modeling approach. The ordered probit modeling approach was employed because the data was ordered in nature, as well as the fact that ordered probit modeling, it was in categories that were from extremely unlikely to extremely likely. We did some likelihood ratio tests to understand how many models did we need to estimate. Did we need one model for all the 4 clusters, or did we need 2 models, 3 models, 4 models? We found that we needed to model each cluster separately, which means that there was an adoption model for the benefits dominated market segment, there was an adoption model for the concerns dominated market segment, and there was an adoption model for the well-informed market segment, and there was an adoption model for the uncertain market segment. So we estimated these models, and we see the following effects. We see that millennials are more likely to belong. So millennials in a benefits dominated market segment are more likely to adopt autonomous vehicles when they are available in the market. Baby boomers in benefits dominated market segments. So baby boomers who believe that these benefits who believe in these possibility, in the possibility of these benefits, are more likely to adopt this technology when it is available in the market. Similarly, you can see that high household income respondents who belong to the benefits dominated market segment are very likely to adopt this technology. We can see that vehicle ownership, basically multi-vehicle households are less, respondents in multi-vehicle household belonging to benefits dominated market segments are less likely to adopt autonomous vehicles when they are available in the market. So you can see that there are different effects that we see by different colors. There are these positive, there are fixed parameters as well as random parameters. Fixed parameters are essentially the parameters which have influence across all samples, which have the same influence across all the samples in the observation. Whereas random parameters means that a random parameter is used when you have the different influences among the same category of people. For instance, you see that millennial is a random parameter. The interpretation of this is such as not all millennials are likely to adopt it, but most millennials are likely to adopt autonomous vehicles. So one thing that we see in the benefits dominated market segment is that gender and belonging to the university population had no influence in the adoption decisions for this market segment. So next we move on to the concerns dominated market segment, and we see that males belonging to the concerns dominated market segment are less likely to adopt autonomous vehicles when they become available in the market. Same goes for white respondents with low household incomes, respondents who travel a lot for their daily travel, respondents who park soon are less likely to, in a concerns dominated market segment, are less likely to adopt autonomous vehicles when they are available in the household. So we can see from this concerns dominated market segment that current vehicle ownership has no influence in the adoption decisions for this market segment. This was not the case in the previous market segment, where we saw that current vehicle ownership had a significant influence in the adoption process. So the basic idea of using these different clusters is to uncover those deeper insights which are not available in the overall unsegmented models. The overall unsegmented models may miss out on some of these aspects, which are now investigated in greater detail because we have segments which look at specific aspects for these particular segments. Next, we move on to the adoption behavior in an uncertain market segment, where we see that respondents who drive alone to their commute are more likely to adopt autonomous vehicles if they belong to an uncertain market segment. Respondents who travel less for their activities in a day are more likely to adopt autonomous vehicles in an uncertain market segment. So something interesting that we see in the uncertain market segment is that all respondent demographics except income are insignificant in the adoption decisions. So in this particular market segment, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about most of your demographics because most of the demographics are not the influencing factors in your adoption or non-adoption processes. Lastly, we look at adoption behavior from a well-informed market segment. So we found that males who belong to the well-informed market segment, not all males who belong to well-informed market segment are likely to adopt autonomous vehicles when they become available in the market. You see that baby boomers and the great generation, that is the older generations, the two older generations are less likely to adopt autonomous vehicles even when they know about the benefits and concerns of this technology. Similarly, there is a similar observation for the white respondents. Although it shows that not all white respondents behave in the same way with respect to their adoption process. What is interesting here is that most current travel characteristics, except for longer commute times and parking, are insignificant in the adoption decisions of this market segment. So the idea here was to uncover these extra insights so that we can look at targeted marketing of a certain category of consumers who belong and who believe in certain aspects and who believe in certain factors that influence their adoption decisions. So this is the basic flowchart of what we did. We found out that there were 4 autonomous vehicle market segments. Then we found out the probability of respondents belonging to a particular market segment. And then we estimated ordered probit models to understand the factors that influence the adoption of autonomous vehicles. The last part of this presentation focuses on shared autonomous vehicles and their potential impacts on household vehicle ownership. So as we have discussed, there is a possibility that before we get to own autonomous vehicles, a very interesting business model that will come out of it are likely to look like the autonomous vehicle Ubers or autonomous vehicle Lyfts that will be doing the rounds, and most people would get to use that technology before we get to individually own and operate vehicles. So the objective here in this part of the study was to elicit consumers' preferences on relinquishing one of their human-driven vehicles with the introduction of SAVs. We have to note that we are looking at not giving up on all the vehicles, but looking at one particular vehicle. How likely are you relinquishing one unit of your existing vehicles to use shared autonomous vehicles for your commute trips? Once we do that, we also want to see what are the identifying factors that influence the likelihood of this relinquishment of one vehicle to use shared autonomous vehicles. So this is a much smaller data set. This is a much smaller data set with 1,214 respondents, where 417 respondents belong to single vehicle households and 797 respondents belong to multi-vehicle households. You can see some descriptive statistics for single and multi-vehicle households in this slide. We see that when we asked respondents how likely they were to relinquish one personal vehicle with the introduction of shared autonomous vehicles, we see that almost half of the respondents are likely to relinquish one vehicle to use SAVs for their trips, which was very interesting because we were not we were not expecting such high responses, which is interesting to see that respondents already feel that there is in some ways there is a wastage of resources by owning more vehicles than you actually need, that they would be open to the idea of giving up one of those vehicles and using that using shared autonomous vehicles for some of their trips. So the methodology to understand the factors that influence their decisions again is an ordered probit model approach, where we found that we needed to model single and multi-vehicle households separately. We needed to model single and multi-vehicle households separately so that we have two models now, one for single vehicle households and one for multi-vehicle households. So we have a similar, similar graphic as we have seen previously with respect to differences in adoption behavior between single and multi-vehicle households, and we see that males who belong to single vehicle households, not all males who belong to single vehicle households, are less likely to adopt autonomous vehicles, or are less likely to give up a human-driven vehicle to use shared autonomous vehicles. So, and we can see that millennials who belong to single vehicle households are ready to give up are ready to give up their only existing unit in order to use shared autonomous vehicles for their commute. Same goes for households with multiple persons and respondents who travel less for their commute, who travel less than 10 miles for their commute. We see that we see that single licensed driver households, not all single licensed driver households are likely to relinquish one of the vehicles in order to use shared autonomous vehicles for their commute trips. So as I have explained, males in single households, not all males behave this way, and there are more variation in parameters observed in single vehicle households with respect to the presence of many more random parameters than in the multi-vehicle households. Because I feel like the decisions in a single vehicle household are far more complicated and complex in giving up this vehicle rather than being in a multi-vehicle household where it is about giving up one of the many vehicles that you may own. So we see that when it came to multi-vehicle households, we see some similarities in terms of the effects, where you see millennials are likely to give up one of their vehicles in a multi-vehicle household in order to use shared autonomous vehicles. Same goes for graduate degree holders as well. Whereas you see that households which own 3+ vehicles were not interested in giving up one of their vehicles in order to use shared autonomous vehicles for their trips. Ethnic variations are something that is also we've seen, and this is again we are alluding to the presence of the entrenchment to the driving culture that we have explained earlier, that perhaps makes respondents less likely to give up some of these vehicles. There are some other aspects as well that you can see. There's something with crash involvement that makes respondents more likely to give up one of their vehicles in order to use a technology that is perceived to be safer than the human driver. So in conclusion, we looked at assessing public opinions regarding autonomous vehicles. The current study provided an in-depth understanding of public opinions, and at a generational level as well, which is more granular than what we hear in normal conversations. This helps us to provide deeper insights into the respondents' attitudes and preferences. Understanding consumers' perceptions and internet adoption was done through 3 stages, and we have uncovered different triggers that exist towards the adoption or non-adoption of autonomous vehicles through the 4 market segments that we identified. And lastly, we looked at the potential of shared autonomous vehicles on reducing household vehicle ownership, and we see again that there are differences in adoption triggers between single and multi-vehicle households. So we have come to the end of the presentation, and I would just like to thank my research partners, AAA, the Next Lab, Qatar, and University of South Florida. And we can move on to any questions that any of you may have.
Hi, Nikhil. Thank you so much for the great and an informative presentation. I would like to remind everybody how to ask a question. That Q&A box is located in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. We do have several questions that have already come in, and so Nikhil, what I'll do is I'll read them out loud, and then feel free to respond.
Okay. It
says, any thoughts why there were significantly more millennials who were not interested in taking AV trips on slide 30?
This is something that has been bothering us in a way for some time as well. We were trying to figure out what were the possible reasons that millennials were not interested in undertaking AV trips. It perhaps alludes to the fact that there is a lot of development right now, as well as back then, on AVs that were on the negative front, which may have influenced their responses in a particular way. So I feel like we still need more investigation into what might be the reasons that are making them not want to take these trips, but it is something that has been bothering our minds as well for some time.
Okay. And then someone's looking for a little bit of clarification. It says, could you re-explain what is considered well-informed? Is it recognized? Is it recognition of certain AV marketing terms or potentials, or is it something like the actual current state of AV tech?
That is a great question, Raman. I think I need to clarify that. So basically, these market segments that we identified are on the basis of respondents' perception of the benefits and safety. So basically, we classified them into well-informed market segment when we saw that respondents were equally aware of the benefits and concerns regarding autonomous vehicles, and we see that, and when we saw that those particular benefits and concerns influenced their adoption decisions. So basically, to answer your question, anyone is considered well informed if they have an equal opinion of the benefits and concerns. They are more well-rounded in terms of their understanding of what are the benefits and concerns with autonomous vehicles.
Okay. Next question comes in. It says, did you inquire as to whether people who are currently making non-automobile trips, such as bike bus, are considered replacing those more sustainable trips with SAV trips when they become available?
So we did inquire about what were the current modes of travel for respondents for undertaking their trips. As expected, there is only a few, a significantly lower percentage of respondents who are currently making non-automobile trips, which does not warrant enough to investigate this in this aspect, which is essentially difficult to model and produce any kind of qualitative results. But of course, there are respondents who are currently using non-automobile trips, making non-automobile trips, and perhaps a small chunk of them are likely to use SAVs. It's also dependent on the cost aspects of it. So we aren't currently completely sure of this aspect.
Okay. Next question comes in and says, great research and a great presentation. One of the early slides you talked about market penetration of 2025 versus 2040. What is meant by market penetration, and just the fact that AVs will be available for purchase, or does it imply that the certain percentage will be in the fleet? If it's the latter, what is the percentage?
I'm unable to provide a certain percentage to a certain percentage to what would be considered as market penetration, but I can say that when we look at the timeline between 2025 and 2040 to 2050, we're looking at year 2025 when we may have the option to use some form of automation, which is most likely going to be on a shared AV spectrum. Those options will be available for us as early as 2025, with one or two providers in the market. Maybe Uber and Lyft are going to start their AV shuttles by 2025. But when you're looking at 2040, we are looking at the system level benefits. That is, what are the benefits that you get because of the presence of a significant portion? In studies, in the studies that I have read, these numbers vary between 15 to 20% by 2040, but there is no surety on how they have arrived at these numbers. So the idea, most of them are simulation-based approaches, which simulate different numbers based on different conditions that they input. So my guess is we are not going to see 100% market penetration. If that is the aim, we are looking at somewhere between 20 to 40%.
Okay, Nikhil. With that being said, I'm going to say thank you once again for the great presentation. I'm going to open up the evaluation. If you could just take a few moments to complete that evaluation. As I stated earlier, the feedback included is not only important to the presenter, but also very important to the Qatar Transportation webcast series. Our next webcast is scheduled for August 16th, so that is in 2 weeks from today. Also talking about autonomous vehicles, so operation and planning for connected autonomous vehicles from trajectory control to capacity analysis, presented by one of the professors here at the University of South Florida. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us, and we will see you in 2 weeks.